Hello and welcome to one and all. We will continue with the remedial measures for income and wealth inequalities in India. So in the previous class, we checked 4 measures. That is, like the land reforms and redistribution of agricultural land and the MRTP Act in order to control the monopolies in the country, and some of the employment wage policies initiated by the country, and some of the social security measures which are available in our country. So 4 measures we have seen. Now moving on to the next measure, the 5th one, something called as the minimum needs program. So this actually what happened was the government when started the planning process in the first, in 1951, the government was mainly concentrating only on the increase in the growth rate of national income and per capita income. More importantly, the growth rate in the national income of the country. So the government thought that if the production in the country keeps on increasing, and if the national income of the country side by side keeps on increasing, then automatically the poverty levels and the income inequalities and all those things will be rectified in the country. So the government did not mainly concentrate on all these things for the income inequalities, for the poverty happening in the country, the increase in the population. So it is not, the government was not focusing on all those aspects. The government was only focusing on the rise in the national income of the country, because the government was under the opinion that if the growth rate in the national income is continuous, then over a period of time, all the poorer sections of the population will be benefited, and whatever the problems associated like the overpopulation, the poverty, the unequal distribution of income and wealth, all those things will be set right. So that was the opinion of the government. But then by the end of the 4th 5-year plan, it was understood that it was not happening like that. So even though the planning process was happening, even though the economic developmental process is happening in the country, side by side, the population is also increasing in the country, the income inequalities is also increasing in the country, the poverty levels is also was also increasing in the country. So some of the economists argued that, they wanted a separate programs to be implemented so that the benefits of economic development will reach even to the poorer sections of the population. So they were all under the opinion that the poorer sections of the population, they are not even having that some of the basic facilities which are required for survival. So they suggested the government that the government should directly provide all these minimum needs to the poorer sections of the population all over the country. So from the 5th 5-year plan, the government established a chain of network of basic facilities throughout the country. So what are those basic facilities? Like basic education, health facilities, housing, the sanitation, drinking water. So these are all, etc. All these are the basic necessities for survival, isn't it? So the government started providing all these basic facilities as a network of all these basic facilities throughout the country. So that program is known as the minimum needs program. So that means what? Even the poorer sections of the population will be able to avail the benefits of all these minimum needs. So that is the minimum needs program. Okay. Of course, now it is not there, but at that point of time, it proved to be very, very beneficial. So since by the end of the 5th 5-year plan and the beginning of the 6th 5-year plan, the government started the network of all these basic facilities. So such as, so the government has been providing a network of throughout the country, all the poorer sections, in every local, especially in the villages and all, they don't have all these basic facilities, isn't it? So network of free or subsidized at concessional rates. Either it is available for free, or if it is charged, or it is charged at a very, very concessional rates. This is subsidized basic services like, so these are all the basic services like education, health. So the basic minimum educational facilities, minimum health facilities, housing, water, etc. throughout the country. So basically, these services are expected to benefit the poor people. So if these services are available for them, it will improve their consumption levels and their living standards will increase, and over a period of time, their productivity level will also increase. So their consumption levels and thereby improve their. So if a person is not having the basic health facility or basic housing or water, drinking water facility, you can't expect that laborer to contribute to the production, isn't it? So if the poorer sections of the population, if they are provided with all these basic facilities, their contribution to national income will also increase because their consumption levels will increase. So improve their productive efficiency. Okay, so that was the and also the gap between and they will start working, their productive capacity will increase, they will start getting more and more amount of income, and slowly the income inequalities in the country will decrease. Okay, so that is the idea for providing the minimum needs program. And then the next program initiated by the government was something called as the programs for the uplift of the rural poor. The difference between the previous program and this one is that this program is targeting directly the certain sections of the poorer sections of the population. According to the nature of poverty of each and every section of the poorer sections of the population, programs are devised. That is this one. The previous one is generally for all the poorer sections of the population, the network of the basic facilities were initiated. Okay. So when I was explaining the programs, you will be able to understand better. So who are all the poorest sections in the country? All those, apart from small farmers and marginal farmers, there are someone called as the agricultural laborers. Small farmers at least having less than 2 hectares of land. Marginal farmers are also having a certain amount area, acres of land, hectares of land. But then the agricultural laborers are someone who don't have any land at all. They work as a laborer in some other person's field. Okay, so they are considered to be the poorest of the poorer sections of the population in the country. And apart from that, all the scheduled castes and mostly they belong to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So these people are not having any source of income. They don't have any qualification. They don't have any asset. They don't have any source of income. So what can the government do in order to uplift these poorer sections of the population? So the government devised some program to benefit the most poor sections of the population in the country. Okay, the poorest sections in the rural areas belong to the families of landless agricultural laborers. So they don't have any land on their own. They work in the field of others as laborers. Agricultural laborers. As it is, agriculture is seasonal. On the top of it, if you're working in agricultural laborer, how insecure you will be, you can understand. Small and after agricultural laborers, the next category of poor is the small and marginal farmers, the rural artisans, the scheduled castes, and the scheduled tribes. Okay. So to increase their income levels, these people income levels, the government undertook some programs like the first one, resource and income development program for the rural poor. Second one was special area development programs. And third one was works program for the creation of supplementary employment opportunities. Okay, now the first one, resource and income development programs for the rural poor. So now there are some people, they don't have any resource. As I mentioned, at least the small and marginal farmers, they have a certain piece of land and they can at least cultivate something, they can expect some amount of income. And what about these agricultural laborers? They don't have any resource at all to earn income. They don't have any qualification and they don't have any land at all. So their job is very, very insecure. So what the government wanted to provide some kind of resource to these kind of laborers, in the sense that the government, you remember the land reforms. The land reforms, what the government did, the government imposed the land ceiling, took away the excess land from the big landlords and was redistributing to the poorer sections of the population. In the sense that, so the agricultural laborers, they were provided a certain amount of land. So at least they will have some amount of uh, 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 income earning opportunity. If they have a piece of land on their own, so they can start cultivating and then they can generate certain amount of income. So resource has to be provided to these kind of people so that they will start earning income. And income development programs. So resource and for small and marginal farmers, their area of land is very, very less. So if the government provides additional land, so they can also cultivate better and their income will start increasing. So that is the first program. And the second one is the special area development programs. The special area development programs, in the sense that the other day we were discussing about, isn't it, the drought prone area program. There are certain area which are always prone to drought. See, whatever the land the government got after imposing the ceiling, all those lands are not in the fertile, all those lands were not fertile, and all those lands did not belong to the area where the climatic conditions are proper, etc. So most of the lands were infertile and barren, and also it all belong to the desert or hilly area which are not accessible, etc. So with this amount of, if the government redistributes this kind of land to the poorest sections of the population, what will they do? They have to do something, isn't it? So the government, in order to develop those areas, so the government devised a program like special area development programs. Okay, so drought prone, for example, to put it very simply, for drought prone area program. So maybe it is not possible to cultivate the bed crops like paddy or wheat, but at least the dry crops can be cultivated in those areas. So like that, some program has to be devised according to the suitability of that particular area. So that program, so that the people living around or people who got the land in that particular area, they will start earning certain amount of income. So that is the special area development program. And the third one is the works program for the creation of supplementary employment opportunities. So we all know that agriculture is a seasonal occupation. So only for a certain till the harvest, only for maybe for 5 months or 6 months, they are having the job. The remaining 6 months, they don't have any job. So during the remaining 6 months, supplementary employment opportunities will be provided to the poorer sections of the population. So what is the supplementary employment opportunities? We have seen previous recent is the development of rural infrastructure, crash program, food forward program, all the NREP, RLEGP. So all those programs I mentioned to you, everything is only the construction activities, development of infrastructure. So those kind of programs can be given to the people who are depending on agriculture, which is very seasonal. So during the off season, they will be given these kind of projects. So at least during the off season, they will get that supplementary employment opportunities and they will be able to get the supplement income. Okay. So since agriculture is not giving them the income throughout the year. So these are all the programs. This is directly uplifting the rural poor. So that is the next program. Okay. Then the next one is the last one, taxation. So Indian taxation system is progressive in nature. So the tax base is more. If the income is more, the rate of tax is also more. So it is devised in such a way so that the government takes the excess income through tax from the richer sections of the population, and with that amount collected, provide the welfare measures to the poorer sections of the population. So in that way also, indirectly, the income inequalities is being rectified. Okay. So Indian tax system is progressive and has been designed to prevent concentration of wealth. So more income a person has, more wealth a person has, he has to pay more in the form of tax to the government. So that in that way also, the government is preventing the concentration of wealth in a few hands. Okay. Now these are all some of the remedial measures the government has been implementing. Of course, some of the programs are still there, some of the programs are not there, but then one way or the other, the government has been implementing certain programs to control the income inequalities in the country. Okay. So that ends the second topic, the income inequalities in this unit. First one was national income and the sectoral contributions. And the second topic is the income inequalities. The third topic in this is the poverty. Poverty in India. Okay. So what is the meaning of poverty? I mean, it is said that if a person is not having even the minimum basic necessities of life, so then he is said to be under the poverty. So if you want to put it in words, what is the meaning of poverty? So poverty is a social phenomenon in which a section of the society is unable to fulfill even its basic necessities of life. Okay. So normally we say food, clothing, and shelter, but it is not only food, clothing, and shelter. Initially, it was like that, but over a period of time, more and more uh, things, more and more goods, more and more services are also added in that. What are all the basic necessities of life? Okay, so let us check out. If you know what are the types of poverty, then you will know what are all the those basic necessities included in the minimum subsistence level of living. Okay, so there are two types of poverty. One is the absolute poverty, and the second one is the relative poverty. Okay, so the meaning of absolute poverty is, so a person, this is the basic, the person who is not even able to satisfy himself with minimum subsistence level of living, that the minimum basic necessities of life, is not able to purchase or consume even the minimum necessities of life. So that person is considered as absolutely poor, or a person is said to be absolutely poor if his or her income is so low that he or she lives below the subsistence level. So if we are not having subsistence level of living, means just surviving with our basic necessities of life, that is the subsistence level of living. If a person is not even having that basic necessities of life, then they are living below the subsistence level of living. Okay, so now, what is this subsistence level of living? It is not just the food, clothing, and shelter, which we normally figure of speech we will say. So let's check out what is that subsistence level of living. Okay, so this subsistence level of living includes there's something called as the minimum balanced diet a person has to consume every day, consisting of, so what is that balance in that basket of minimum balanced diet should consist certain quantities of cereals, certain quantities of pulses, milk, butter, and like fruits, eggs, all those things are included in the consumption basket. So this, all these, that's a balanced diet, balanced nutritional diet. A person has to consume this much amount of minimum balanced diet, this many amount of cereal, this much amount of pulses, this much amount quantity of milk, butter, fruits, vegetables, eggs, etc. All those, if the person is consuming, then he is living on the minimum subsistence level of living. Okay, so it is initially in India, instead of mentioning about like cereals, pulses, milk, butter, etc. In the beginning, at least early as 1970s, the Indian Planning Commission, they were mentioning in terms of calories. That means how many amount of calories a person should consume per day. So in terms of calories, so that one is still prevailing, but then that we are not concentrating only in terms of calories. No, now the recent estimation, then the recent standard is all the cereals, pulses, milk, etc. So in terms of calories, as per the Indian Council of Medical Research, So on the advice of the Planning Commission, the Indian Council of Medical Research prescribed. So this minimum should be 2,400 calories per person, that is per capita, per day in rural areas, and 2,100 calories per capita per day in urban areas. Okay. So if the person is not consuming, if a person in the rural area, if he's not consuming 2,400 calories per day, or if the person is not consuming 2,100 calories per day in the urban area, they are considered to be below the poverty line. So this is how the the poverty is being. This is what is called as the absolute poverty. Now let us take what are all the steps involved here. How do you know that this person is consuming? See, we are not actually going and checking each and everyone whether he is consuming 2,400 calories, whether he is consuming this many amount of cereals, this many amount of pulses, this many amount of milk or butter, isn't it? We are not actually going and checking each and every individual separately. So how the government identifies this much percentage of the population or below the poverty line in the country? So there are certain steps involved. So let us check the steps to identify the poverty. So the steps involved. Step 1. First and foremost, what has to be done? First, it has to be identified. So identifying what comprises of nutritional diet per day. So first, in the consumption basket, what all should be there, which you can call it as a nutritional diet a person should consume in a day. That is a step 1. Then step 2, what has to be done? Identifying what should be the minimum quantities of that nutritional diet a person should consume in order to remain healthy. So what should be the minimum quantities a person should consume of these food items so that he remains reasonably healthy. Then after that, how do we identify whether the person is consuming this much amount of that minimum required quantities? So that is based on what is the consumption expenditure incurred by him. So you calculate how much it would cost to consume this many amount of minimum intake of that nutritional diet. So if a person is able to spend that much amount of money income, then he is consuming those food items. So he's above the poverty line. So if income is not even meeting this minimum consumption expenditure, then he is below the poverty line. So the third one is identifying how much expenditure a consumer has to incur. It can be either per month or per day on an average to purchase or consume these quantities of food items. Now, based on this only, we are calculating the poverty line. So, if the person income is poverty line is the line which should enable a person for the consumption of that minimum required amount of that nutritional diet. So, that is the poverty line. and if the person in terms of money. Okay. So how much expenditure he has to consume, that expenditure denotes the poverty line. So if the person's income is below that expenditure, then he is considered to be below the poverty line. So then after identifying, then the next step, what the government has to do, the next step is identify how much percentage of the population were not able to spend this much amount of money income. So that means they are not purchasing the nutritional diet. So then identify the percentage or level of population whose income or consumption expenditure is lower than this. So if a person is not meeting that required amount of consumption expenditure, then in a particular state, in a particular country, how much percentage of the population they are not able to meet that required amount of expenditure. So then based on that, you'll say, okay, this much percentage of the population in this state are below the poverty line. This much percentage of the population in this country is below the poverty line. So this is what is this is how the country is identifying about the percentage of poor people in the country. Okay, and normally absolute poverty prevails in most of the developing countries, including India. Prevails in developing countries. So you can highlight it, including India. Okay. Then the second type I mentioned to you is the relative poverty. So relative poverty is in comparison. So in comparison to the higher income person, then this person is relatively poor. Okay. It is not that maybe that person is above the poverty line only, because the income levels of the standard of living of every section of the population is not same, isn't it? Some are very, very rich, super rich, some are just rich, some are middle income, and then like that, the category. Okay. So compared to the top 10% of the population, the next 10%, they are relatively poor. Still below the next 10%, they are relatively poorer than the previous class. So in comparison with the other person, this person is poor. It is not that they are absolutely poor. Relatively, they are poorer to the other sections of the population. So how do we have, so what is the relative poverty? By comparing the levels of living between different income groups. So that is, for example, comparing the income levels of top 5 to 10% with the bottom or the next 5 to 10%. So based on this, the bottom or next 5 to 10% are relatively poor than the top 5 to 10%. So they might be above the poverty and they are not absolutely poor. They are having that minimum subsistence level of living, everything. But then compared to the other person, they are poor. And this relative poverty mostly prevails in the developed countries. So relative poverty prevails in developed countries. Okay, so that is the difference between absolute poverty and relative poverty. Okay, so in next class, I will continue with the remaining topics. So what we have to find out, what is the percentage of poverty in our country, and of course, what are all the causes and what are all the remedial measures undertaken by the government, which I'll continue with my next class. Hope all of you understood the meaning of absolute poverty and relative poverty. Okay. So if you find this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any doubts, please mention in the comment box. Okay. So until my next class, next video, take care. Bye-bye.